We are live. Okay. Hi, welcome to our Marketers Content Playbook session Q&A. In his Content Playbook session, Adobe Executive Creative Director Adam Morgan dove into the myths of content creation and provided strategies on how your brand can build content with real value. Adam, thank you for all the time you've put into your presentation. Let's start by having you give a short recap, and then we can open the floor to questions.
Sure, yeah. The message is all about, in my book, I did a lot of research on really understanding with hard science what really happens with our messages and stories and communications. And I just found that it's really, in the industry, we're always focusing on the wrong things. We're always focused on, speed, time, length, all of those things. Whereas the most important things that matter is to focus on, can you find an anomaly? And then can you wrap it with an emotional blanket and create an experience? Those are the things that add value. If you really understand your audience, delivering on those elements are what's most important. So focusing on value, not about time, speed, or length.
Great. All right. We loved your presentation. It was very exciting and very interesting. So the first question is, when capturing attention, what emotions do you find are most successful?
I'm so sorry. I only heard half of that.
Oh, let me repeat myself. When capturing attention, what emotions do you find are most successful?
Okay, so if I understood, what emotions are going to capture it the best? So that is an interesting question. And the truth is, in the brain, all the emotions are all the same thing, right? And I would say, number one, there was a study done by Eric Duplessis, and it's called The Advertised Mind. It's a great book, where he took thousands and thousands of ads and images and things and just tested to see, what would be the most important thing in a communication. And they were thinking at the time, maybe it was like length, like it was, let's say, a 60-second spot is going to do better than a 10-second spot, TV spot. But what they found above and beyond everything is the thing that mattered the most is if it was likable. That was the single most important ingredient in all of those communications when they hooked people up to machines and kind of tested their brains. So it's likable. So I would say that's probably why, normally emotion that's a positive emotion usually resonates better. Fear and uncertainty and doubt certainly are emotions we can play with, but maybe that's not a good long-term brand strategy. But at least short-term, or at least thinking about, an emotion that you should have. Number one, I would say, what's the emotion that resonates with your brand the most? That could be insight, it could be inspiration, it could be humor, it could be anything. Like, all of those emotions are valid. I would just look for an emotion that fits the brand and that's positive and is likable.
Makes sense. You want to run emotions. Wow, we know emotion is at the top of the list. Is it important to still follow the guidelines of time and speed when creating content?
Oh man, I am so sorry.
Is my audio better?
Audio, yes, it is.
Okay. I will take over some of these questions.
Sorry.
I think the question was, is it still important to follow the guidelines of time and speed while also trying to maintain, the tenets of emotion that you talked about?
Sure. And maybe to answer that one, let me give there's an insight in content in terms of an engagement system. So when I went to grad school recently for funsies, there was a pyramid that Northwestern had as far as engagement. There is sorry, someone's at my door ringing the doorbell. I apologize for that noise. No idea who that is. Anyhow, there's this pyramid of engagement where it's like at the top, you start with social, engagement, and you move all the way down into deeper engagement. So at the top, you're going to have shallow discussions. You're going to things like social media or your feed, whatever it may be. And as you go deeper and deeper down that funnel, you'll get into things like articles, and then finally communities and long, deep conversations at the bottom. And I would say speed and time really matter, but it depends on where in the funnel, like where you are. If you're doing something in the feed and a social feed, sure, something faster is going to maybe work better because people are flipping through things. But again, going back to my point is like, it's not a matter of fast. It's a matter of, if you have a moment that resonates really, even if it's really quickly, like the brain can understand something in nanoseconds. It doesn't take a lot of time. It'll know like in a short burst whether it's going to like it or not, or whether it's going to connect with it. So even if you have something that has high value at the top, you don't have to worry about speed. Like, you don't have to make your video 10 seconds long. It could be a 2-minute long video on there. If it's really valuable, people will stick around. But that said, there's also just like conventions that people are used to certain things. So if it isn't a social feed, you're not going to, want them to sit and, read a 100-page paper, right? It's really, it's all about finding the medium that fits it. So speed and time and those things matter, but I don't think it's the most important thing. I don't think you should make your plan around speed and time. I think you should plan around value, and then find the appropriate speed or find the appropriate time that fits that content.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Super interesting. So I'm actually a Northwestern undergrad right now, and I assume you pursued the integrated marketing certificate or the master's program at Northwestern?
I did.
Great, that's cool. So I'm just curious, like, is it important, you think, to continue post-grad studies in marketing, and like what advice would you give to students who are interested in the industry?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know. You've heard this from so many other people that it's like, you got to be a lifelong learner. I mean, I'm 25 years into my career, and I went back and got a master's degree in integrated marketing just because I knew I wanted exposure. So I took like one class at a time just for fun, just so that I could, better relate with my stakeholders and my team. So in my mind, and I've always said like this to many of my team members, is if you want to lead, you have to read. You have to keep up with the latest books, keep up with the latest learning platforms. I mean, there's so much out there right now, free stuff on LinkedIn Learning, or, get a platform like Lynda or whatever it is, and just keep exposing yourself to new ideas. I think that's so critical. Or go get a degree at a higher education. They're going virtual now too. So whatever you need to do to stay sharp, I think is important. Keep learning.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess kind of continue on that train of thought, like what kinds of hard skill and opportunities would you recommend that students pursue in the beginning of their careers?
Well, it depends on what kind of a career you want. If you're going into the creative field, if you're going into marketing, if you're going into strategy, if you're going into production, like there's so many career paths in our industry. And so really it is a mix of the hard and soft skills. I mean, the soft skills are pretty common, but the hard skills, like if you're going to be a designer, you've got to learn, design programs. If you're going to be a writer, you got to learn the craft of storytelling. If you're going to be a marketer, you've got to learn, the 4 Ps and all the other, integrated marketing systems and plans. If you're going to be a strategist, you really have to think deeply about human insights and how you're going to find them. So the hard skills all depend on what your path is going to be. And then beyond that, I've noticed that as people move up in their career, it becomes more and more important for you to have really good, high EQ or soft skills. You're building relationships, understanding the room, being able to read the room, being able to distill everything down to the most important idea, being able to take action on the things that matter versus those that don't. So that's such a huge question, but there's a lot out there that you can certainly find.
So then, Adam, how did you work your way up and kind of break into the industry and ultimately end up as a creative director?
Sure. My career path, I actually thought I was going to be a chemical engineer at first. That's what I went to school for, because I was going to invent something, and then realized that I hated the labs and being alone, and I'm more of an extrovert. So I switched over to advertising and then started in the ad agency world. And that was great for me because, like, working dog years, you learn so much in that industry. And I worked for just a lot of different agencies for about 19 and a half years. Big ones like Publicis and McCann Erickson and Euro RCG, and then small boutique shops. Like I lived in Jackson Hole for almost 5 years at an outdoor recreation agency, which was awesome. And just along the way, it was, my progression was learning the skills of idea generation and crafting experiences and building, great great experiences, whether they're digital or physical. And then, eventually, as I got better at that, I started to learn that it's not just, there's this big chasm between, at least in the creative world, and I'm sure this applies whether you're in, a developer in IT or in marketing, but it's like we feel like if we just get really good at those hard skills, that eventually we'll just have to become a leader. Where we may say, oh, okay, I'm really, really good at design, or I'm really, really good at, project management, or whatever it may be, that I automatically need to be a leader. And there is such a huge chasm, I found, that really making that leap is all about all of those all those soft skills, right? So are you good at relationships, reading the room? Do you have good EQ? Do you have good, ability to organize things? And, it's like, even as a creative, I had to learn to be a project manager. I had to learn operations. I had to learn, to speak business, to speak marketing, like all of those things. You have to be well-rounded in it, so that when you make that leap, you really are ready to lead and guide. And then, the people management stuff, that's, an element, but that's not usually what gets you there. Like saying, oh, I can manage my cohorts. It's really about, if think about it in terms of the point of view. If you were, on the C-suite of a company looking down for the next leader, it's looking for those who have vision, those who can guide and lead and move and make and inspire and make a difference. So there's a lot of soft skills that are involved in making that leap.
Yeah, definitely. So what tips do you have, or like how does your strategy change in terms of evoking emotion for graphics versus video?
That's just like the difference of still versus motion, right? In a still image, in graphics, in design, you're really trying to capture a moment in time. You're really trying to get a concept that plays out in that one moment. Whereas with video, you have the opportunity of movement, of change. And so you can set up a story and then pay it off. It's really, honestly, it's a lot easier in video to hit at those emotions because you have a little more of a palette to play with, where you can introduce new elements and new things and kind of makes and pretty much tell the story, like literally tell the story. Whereas in still graphic art, for me, for most of my career, it's been the marriage of words and pictures in the still moment. It's a great headline with a great visual, and how those two work together. And the way I've described it, it's almost like you want to paint a picture and complete a circle, but leave the last little bit out so that the people can make that last connection and make the whole circle. But if you make it too wide open, it's too vague and people don't get it. If you close it off too much, it's cliche and people think it's too obvious. So the craft of a still moment is telling just enough story and letting them fill in the right amount.
Yeah, that's great. And then I have one last question. So how do you balance working with everyone's different interpretations of creative content with a team? Like, how do you collaborate best?
Oh, that's a challenge. That's the job, right? It's listening to everyone, and really, a lot of times where I would approach it is it's not just, a lot of times it's whoever has the highest title in the room wants to trump everything, but it really should be, you should know your strategy, you should know your goals, you should know your plans, and then you're just assessing all of these ideas against those and making sure that you pick the one that works the best, that it, not just that, someone likes the most, but what's going to work the best. That's hard. That's really that balance of data and creativity, right? Where the data has to inform the insights, and then we find the creative that satisfies those insights. So I don't know. I found that most times when you talk it through, I don't think most people are trying to be difficult and fight for completely different ideas that are, on opposite ends of the spectrum. I really feel like sometimes it's just some personal preferences, and then as long as you're in that same area, that's where it just comes down to who owns what. If I'm working with a strategist, they get to own who the plan and who they're going after. But as the creative leader, I'm going to own the actual execution. So what final word we use or what final image we use. But so I would say it's a matter of finding the strengths that each of you have at the table, and then but each still owning an element of it, so that you feel like you have ownership, but you're still collaborating.
Perfect. Thank you so much for everything. my audio. And then keep talking, but thank you so much, and we'll get talking soon.
Well, thank you. And feel free to reach out. This is just the end of one Q&A, but find me on LinkedIn or whatever if you have more questions. I'm happy to connect.
Sounds awesome. Thanks so much.
All right.